Seattle, New Jersey, Alabama, Missouri, Pennsylvania, Virginia. Awesome. Thank you so much, everybody, for joining us. We're going to go ahead and get started now. This webinar is being recorded. A link to the recording will be made available. Welcome to our webinar on literacy and STEM activity resources you can use this summer. My name is Leslie Gabay Swanston. I'm the Director of Program and Systems Quality at the National Summer Learning Association. Before we get started, here's an overview of our discussion today. First, I'll share a little bit about NSLA and why we believe summers are so important. Then we'll hear from our presenters. And we'll have some time for your questions, and after that, we'll wrap up with some announcements. As we're going along, if you have any questions for our speakers, please put them in the Q&A box. We'll try to catch them if they're in the chat box, but it's a little harder to see there. So if you have any questions that you want asked and answered live, please put them in the Q&A box. The National Summer Learning Association is the only national nonprofit exclusively focused on increasing access to summer learning opportunities. NSLA's goal is to increase nationwide the number of high-quality summer learning programs. To achieve this goal, NSLA recognizes and disseminates what works, offers expertise and support for programs and communities, and advocates for summer learning as a solution for equity and excellence in education. NSLA's work is driven by the belief that all children and youth deserve high-quality summer learning experiences that will help them succeed in college, career, and life. Through our work, we aim to have an impact on the lives of the most vulnerable students by addressing summer learning loss and closing the achievement and opportunity gaps. So why do we believe summer is such an important time? We know that summer is a time of great inequity for young people, and we believe that promoting and supporting summer opportunities is a way to address this. This goes beyond the summer learning that's in our name. We also want to see programs and communities addressing access to other resources like meals and summer youth employment. We see summer as a time for improvement for both students and staff, as a time of innovation, as a time for staff to test out and try new ideas and strategies before scaling up. We see it as a time for integration and for building new partnerships that might not have time for during the school year. And finally, we see summer as a time for activities that can have both immediate and long-term impact on the lives of youth. So many of you are probably familiar with the idea of summer learning loss, but for those of you who are not, I want to share this graphic. So what you see on the screen are lines depicting middle-income students in orange, and below that in purple, low-income students. And these are average reading achievement levels. So you'll see on the left that our middle-income and low-income students start out roughly at the same achievement levels going into kindergarten and progress learning at the same rate during the school year. But during the summer, those bars that you see in gray, during the summers where we see our lower income students without any kind of intervention, we start to see them losing some of those skills that they have gained during the school year. Without any type of intervention, we'll see them slipping further and further behind their middle income peers who continue to learn those 2 to 3 months of summer. So that each school year, they're starting just slightly further behind their peers. We see this pattern repeating summer after summer, creating what we call an achievement gap. But really that achievement gap can be thought of as an opportunity gap because it's missing out on those opportunities to learn, explore, and have new experiences that puts children further behind. And you can imagine with our current situation with COVID-19 and students being away from school for additional 2 to 3 months on top of the normal 2 to 3 months of summer, researchers are projecting an even greater impact, not only on the academic achievement of students, but on their physical, social, and emotional well-being as well. I'd like to briefly touch on a little bit more of the research and the data that's been collected on summer and summer learning. So 1/3 of households have at least one child that participates in summer program. And of those not participating, 51% said that they would if a program was available to them. We see that the average cost per week per child for a summer program is $288, putting it out of reach for a lot of families, especially if they have multiple children. Looking at the health impacts, we see two sides of the same coin, with only 1 in 6 children who qualify for free and reduced lunch during the school year are receiving those same services during the summer. We also see minority children gaining weight up to twice as fast during the summer compared to the school year, due to lack of any activity and access to healthy meals. So now these stats are a few years old and we're in the process of starting to update them. But I would say that anecdotally, we've seen the situation steadily improving, but it's still not nearly where we would like it to be. So what can we do to help address this situation? I'd like to introduce now our first two speakers, Laura Johnson, VP of Communications for NSLA, and our founder, Matthew Boulay.
Thanks, Leslie, and welcome everyone. We're going to dive right into the conversation. I'm Laura Johnson, and it is my honor to introduce Dr. Matthew Boulay, NSLA's founder and, without a doubt, the man behind the summer learning movement over the last 25 years. Matthew, welcome and congratulations on your new book, When Schools Are Closed. We know all summers are not created equal, and we also know that all children, regardless of their zip code or background, deserve enriching summer experiences. And Matthew, this has been your life's work, but I'm sure you've never seen a school year and a summer like this before. So tell us what it's been like for you, one as a dad during this pandemic, and how this book came to be in less than, I'd say, 2 months. I think 2 months you took to write it.
Well, thanks, Laura, and Leslie as well, and hello to everyone out in Zoom land. I have a 17-year-old and a 14-year-old, 2 girls, and you know, my wife and I talk every night. It is not easy, and in some ways, I think it's easier with teenagers than it might be when the kids, you know, were much younger. But I think it's important, you know, for us as parents and as advocates to acknowledge to each other how hard this is. I mean, this summer really is unlike and school year unlike anything we've experienced. We've been worried about summer learning loss, you know, for decades now. NSLA's 25 years old, and the loss that's projected, the academic loss that's projected this year, you know, is possibly twice as worse as previous summers, and we don't know really what the end of it is. But beyond that, you know, it's a concern for the whole child, and questions of academic loss are certainly important, but children's social and emotional well-being, you know, the health and access to food. I mean, these are the things that we're worried about. And one small example as my 14-year-old had a pandemic birthday, and lots of people are celebrating pandemic birthdays. I'm at an age where I don't want a big birthday celebration, but it's hard when you're a 14-year-old, and that's one of the things that is part and parcel of schools being closed, kids not seeing their peers.
And so this book came out of really your moment of thinking parents really need support right now. And I thought it was interesting that you talk about the absence of schooling in the book and the state of unfinished learning. So can you share a little bit about that, and then kind of also the journey in writing this book?
Yeah. Well, you're right. I actually started writing the book on April 1st. And it was, a couple of weeks into the pandemic. Our schools here in Oregon, or Salem, had been shut down for about 2.5, 3 weeks at that point. And, I started to think about kind of two parts. One is framing. How can parents and the educators and advocates who work with parents really think about sort of big picture, think about this summer? And then secondly, it's just like what to do. How do you help your kid when schools are closed? And the notion for me of the absence of schooling is a way to think about all of the roles that schools play in our lives. And so much of the discussion and debate in this country, is really focused on the academic piece, as important as that is, right? Qualified teachers and testing and grades. But when schools suddenly closed, I think everyone in the country realized all of the roles that schooling plays, right? Schooling keeps our kids safe and healthy when we go to work. And suddenly we have working from home situations and kids popping up on Zoom video calls, right? And schooling structures our children's lives as well as our own lives, right? During this time when school's in session, our kids have a routine, and so much of our daily structure flows from that. When they go to bed, when they wake up, what they do when they come home from school in terms of homework. And then, of course, these questions of kids having access to quality social interaction through schooling, both with their peers and with adults, but also having access to free breakfast or breakfast and lunch. And so in the absence of that, suddenly it's a whole new ball game. And this summer we don't have camps and programs in many places. And so parents are really struggling, I think, not just on the academic piece, but to think about how do you create that structure, for your kids and for your family.
Yeah, I think we were laughing the other day that your girls have eaten Pringles for breakfast, and Sam has eaten all kinds of things that I would not normally feed him for breakfast. So the structure has completely just,
Pringles for breakfast. I'm ashamed to admit it.
It's unraveled a bit. But I think the notion of structure around the whole child is really interesting that you mentioned, and it's so critical even going into the summer months. We typically think of the lazy, hazy days of summer, but you talk about the structure around the whole child, and that learning still matters, and how we can give ourselves some grace, but also have some intentionality around how we plan for summers. Can you share a little bit more about that, Matthew?
Yeah, and I think you said it exactly right. It's sort of that intentionality around planning for summer with the whole child in mind. So planning, this summer is not just like, how do I get my kid to do an hour of math and to keep their reading skills up. It's really about, during what could be 6 months, maybe longer, how do you create some structure for your children, and how do you how do you, even during a period of quarantine, keep them engaged, with their peers and with other adults in a way that supports that social and emotional learning, right? So one of the things we know from research on summers, years past, is that many kids tend to get isolated during the summer months. And that isolation in more extreme cases, can really lead to uh, um, feelings of lower self-esteem or even depression. And that's not even in the era of quarantining and pandemic. So building in as best you can, given your unique circumstances, time for play, time for social interaction, certainly downtime, but not so much downtime as we struggle with, that it just becomes screen time, sort of endless screen time. But the challenge, I think, Laura, is in years past, we talk about summer learning loss as not so much a problem in one summer, but what happens summer after summer after summer. And that analogy, I think, is useful now, because we have this first 3-month period, of March, April, May, when schools were closed. Then we have the summer of June, July, August. But now we're starting to think even about very irregular school year in September, October, November. We just got notification from our school district that they aren't sure yet what schooling will look like starting in September, but they are sure it won't look like it did last year, right? So we are expecting, my kids to go maybe every other day, or maybe just in the mornings, and, all sorts of shifting around of the day. So then the question is, how do we build ongoing support, for them?
The dedication in your book reads, "Our children need us more than ever. Be strong in the conviction that the love you give your children is the greatest gift they will ever receive." And I thought that was just really beautiful. And again, it gives parents grace that their love is really an amazing asset during this moment. So I would love for you to share just a little sneak peek of what's in the book. It's been divided in 3 sections, and there's some really incredible guiding principles around how we should be thinking about our summers, this particular summer. And Matthew, as a former teacher, you have such insights about what our students need developmentally, but also the social emotional piece. And I think you've woven that so beautifully in the book. Can you give us a little sneak peek before we get into our conversation with Liz McChesney and Brett Nichols?
Yeah, sure. And that dedication, Laura, it's almost a reminder to myself, that some days what they really need is a hug and love and expressions of support. Kids are scared from what they see in the news, just like we are. So, really sort of being in tune with what folks are how kids are feeling is always important, but perhaps more important than ever. And so we can see that the table of contents, the second chapter there is about the research we know on summer learning loss. And what I tried to do was summarize it in a way that's very easy and digestible. It's not academic, but it really focuses on the whole child. And there's actually a ton of research on what happens during absence of schooling to the whole child. And then, Leslie, I don't know if you're able to advance, but I think we have the 9 principles. And it's really just a way of thinking broadly about how to approach the summer. So, just for a quick moment, let's look at number 1 and number 9. Summer learning is not summer school, right? We've been saying that in the field of summer learning for a long time. And it's been a real successful shift, I think, over 20 years in our field. That 20 years ago, most summer programs were really a lot like summer school. They tended to be punitive, mandatory, remedial. In the best experiences nowadays, summer programs are all about innovation and creativity and excitement, and helping meet your kids' interests where they are. And that's, kind of more important than ever. So what parents do not need to do is replicate the school year this summer. My wife and I always say, we don't have to teach our children advanced chemistry and trigonometry this summer. And thank goodness for it, because I'm not prepared to. But Laura, I think it's useful to just jump through, each of these. Most of them are about sort of structure and the whole child. But number 9 there is parents taking care of themselves, that we need to be good to ourselves so that we can be good to our children. And that's not easy given the challenges that parents are facing, but it's I think useful and important to remind ourselves of that. Leslie, do you have the next slide, or are there some of those toolkits? Yeah, okay. And is there one more, Leslie, or okay, there, great. So this is what the second sort of part of the book is, and I call them digital learning toolkits. They're essentially a series of activities for parents to, very easily engage their children with. I had a small team of researchers, and Liz McChesney was sort of my lead partner here, finding resources online that are free and high quality and safe, for kids of all ages, mostly elementary and middle, but even my high schoolers find some things of interest in here. But from learning to code to discovering contemporary Latin America, that, these are 2 good examples of the diversity of activities. I think the last thing I'll say is this is not a textbook. It's not meant to feel like a textbook. It's not meant to be linear and sequential the way schooling and classroom instruction is. It's really meant to sort of be 1,000 points of fun inspiration, for kids and parents on a daily basis. So there are 40 of these digital learning kits across a bunch of different domains here.
And Matthew, before you introduce Liz, I was just going to say it's so important. I think one of the principles in there was that summer and this moment should be student and child driven, and I love that principle because summer does allow us to have the freedom to have our children, really kind of tap into what they love, their interests, and even though we're all sheltered at home, those things can still come to life during this moment in time. That's been really difficult, but kids still have, interests and passion. So thank you for lifting that up.
Yeah, well, I'm glad you highlighted that. And look, it takes a little bit of work on the parent to figure out what is in their child's interest, right? I mean, I have 2 kids, and one of them, it's very clear. She wakes up every day and she says, I want to do A, B, C, and D, and the other, you ask her and she goes, I don't know, right? and so what I don't mean to imply is that, you sort of say to your kids, hey, what do you want to do? And they're able to sort of articulate a learning agenda for themselves. You have to be a little bit inventive, and it takes some work, and that's part of the challenge is how do we find time, to plan, to bring intentionality to it, and to stay strong, day after day. But let me pause there because I'm really excited about having Liz and Brett on. I think we agreed on a sort of a structure where each speaker introduces the next. So I'll introduce Liz, and Liz in turn will introduce Brett. I've known Liz for a number of years. She is a huge champion children, summer learning, libraries, formerly head of children's library services for the city of Chicago's library system. She retired a year ago, which I think is Chicago's loss and a gain for the world of summer learning. Liz and Brett just completed, perfect timing, this beautiful book. And I would be remiss if I didn't thank Liz once again for all of the work she did on my book. And so Liz, thank you, and please take it away.
Well, thank you, Matthew, and thank you, Laura and Leslie, for having Brett and me here today. I just have to say that I think.
Uh-oh.
I think, Brett, that maybe we lost Liz.
Yep, I think we may have lost Liz, so she will be back here in a moment. So, you know, there's.
Here she is.
Oh, here I am. Can you see me?
Yes.
Sorry about that. My internet is unstable. So Matthew's book is great for parents. It gives what I think Laura was saying about the grace of this moment for parents, but it's also going to be really great for program providers. It's adaptable for your own programs. Librarians, I saw a bunch of you were signing up for this. It would be great to recommend to parents who are worried, but also to take and adapt into programs for your own libraries and your own sites. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about Brett and me so that you understand why Brett and I are old friends. These are all old friends on this webinar today. Old friends and partners. We've worked together for the last 8 years while I was at Chicago Public Library and Brett was formerly at the Museum of Science and Industry. And we've had tremendous success in pairing STEM activities with children's literature. And that's going to be what we talk about today, and the work that we've just published is just absolutely about that, very adaptable for families. But first, here's Brett to introduce himself and tell you a little bit about what museums are doing this summer in his new role.
Yeah, and it has absolutely been a pleasure to work with you, Liz, and Matthew as well, thinking about what do we do for parents and families during this summer. So I recently left the Museum of Science and Industry, and I am now at the DuPage Children's Museum, which looks like my background, although I'm not actually there right now. And I serve as the chief of play and learning, and I think it's really important that play comes first, because especially when we're talking about children in, pre-kindergarten, kindergarten, or maybe even in that birth to 3 age, play is how kids learn. And so a lot of these activities are geared a little bit towards older children, but there's a magic about storytelling and about listening to your parents read stories from you that is such a natural way to go into the amazing, fun, hands-on learning activities that are in this book. So a lot of museums all over the country right now are doing amazing things because we're all trying to reach parents while they're at home. So we are putting things out on our websites, we're putting things on our social media. So look at your local museum and look at their website, look at their Facebook page, their Instagram, and see what's out there. The DuPage Children's Museum there's my little kid. The DuPage Children's Museum is putting out activities that are not only for kids every day, but also resources for parents, how you can keep yourself socially and emotionally healthy during these trying times. So there's all sorts of resources that are out there. Everyone is trying to help. So look at the museums that are in your backyard, or come out to the DuPage Children's Museum Facebook page. We put stuff out every day.
Thanks, Brett. And libraries are reopening across the country. Here in Chicago, I believe the Chicago Public Library is one of the first libraries to reopen to the public. But libraries are opening, and I'm seeing that they're offering really inventive ways to offer their summer reading programs. They're doing community-wide sort of book book drives, if you will, to have a community read a certain amount, with huge thermometers out on front lawns of libraries. Curbside pickup of books that are placed on hold is happening, some virtual book clubs. And then I also think this is really fun that drive-in movie theater has sort of reemerged as a way to bring programming to people in library parking lots. So museums and libraries are definitely back, and will be back stronger and better than ever. So our focus today is to talk a little bit about STEM and STEAM learning. And we have a few points about this. I'll be fast. First, you know, STEM learning in the out of school time, like Matthew and Laura were talking about, is really about interest-driven and child-driven learning. And so this is a way to spark curiosity in our kids and to get them thinking creatively. But it's also really important for their future, right? So we know that STEM learning helps build those critical 21st century skills that IMLS called out for museums and libraries 20 years ago. And those really can be distilled to 4 different, we call them the 4 C's of 21st century learning: creativity, collaboration, communication, and critical thinking. And I think if you think about the whole spring we've just come through and the summer we're in, you can see why those skills are so important in the 21st century. And part of that really leads to the second bullet point, that we are building science literate youth. Now more than ever, in a quickly and rapidly advancing technological time, we have a real need to understand and consume science well. COVID really drove that point home for me, that I didn't need to be an epidemiologist, but I did need to understand what was happening and understand exponential growth and all sorts of those good skills that come from STEM learning. We used to use this third bullet as sort of our last point, but I think in an election year, it's important to remember that we're creating informed voters when we help develop literate kids. And that's all kinds of literacies, including science and technological literate kids. That's how we're going to see, I just heard on public radio this morning that the DNC is thinking that's how much of the convention will be held for the Democrats, is sort of a Zoom platform political convention. That's how we're going to get information and make decisions as voters. And then, of course, all of this leads to developing the skills and the attributes that our kids need to get ready. The US Department of Labor says that almost 1 in 20 jobs 15 out of 20 jobs of 2025 have not yet been invented. That's just 5 years from now. So our kids have to be really nimble, and they have to be able to learn new skills and to have the sort of mindset, the growth mindset, that helps them accrue those new skills as they go and in school. And lastly, and I think most importantly for summer learning, it's fun. Brett and I love to blow things up and drop things off of great heights. I think that's where our friendship and collegial relationship really started, was from dropping eggs from great heights. And I'm a mom. I don't love the idea of a big mess or dropped eggs inside my house, but I don't mind them on the sidewalk or in our driveway. But I also know that sparking curiosity is the entry point to learning. And that's what summertime is meant to do. It's meant to reinforce the things that kids learn in the school year in a new and fresh way that helps them enjoy their learning all that much more and explore what they may want to do in the future. So I think STEM learning still matters, but I also think this is a moment in time to talk about equity in STEM. It's the right thing to do, but it's also the imperative of the country. The United States needs to develop a diverse workforce, and we've left people behind in the STEM pipeline. It's called the leaky pipeline. It's a real term. The McKinsey Foundation put out a report in 2018 about this. that shows that children in poverty and non-dominant communities are left behind in both formal STEM education in their schools, and then also in access to informal learning. It goes right back to what Leslie was saying about the opportunity gap. We need an ethnically diverse workforce, and we see that a diverse workforce outperforms other workforces by 35%. So the United States needs this, and we need it right now. We also see that it's linked to higher productivity and innovation. And like I said, it's our imperative as providers to provide greater equity in our programs and to remove barriers and increase access. And I think as parents, we have to hold programs accountable. If I were still at my library, I would want to be held accountable by parents for the way I was building equity plans. Erin Dorkin, the current CEO of NSLA, recently said that COVID-19 is really a time for us to focus on improvement and partnerships and collaboration. And certainly that's how Brett and I began working together, was through a partnership between the museum and the library. And we were able to double our access to high quality STEM and literacy activities for kids because of that partnership. Now is the time for us to be innovative and to solve some of these problems that we can and that are within our means. So our battle cry has always been and will always be remove barriers, increase access, and close the opportunity gap. And I believe summer is a great opportunity to do that, whether you're a mom, a dad, or a program provider. So we're going to turn this over now to Brett, and he's going to talk about our new book.
Yeah, and this book was an absolute joy to put together because it is exactly what Liz had said earlier. It's fun. And in a moment, I'm going to show you an example of an activity that you can do. The one that's not actually in this book. It's a bonus activity that you get to see today. But every activity in this book is tied to a story as an entry point, and then there's a really fun hands-on activity. And all of these, you can do them alongside with your kid, whether it's your own child or if it's with a program participant. But I absolutely highly recommend as adults that we fully engage in these activities, because even though it is fun for children, it should be fun for you as well. And I think it's really important for us to model to the kids that are in our lives that we can still embrace learning. And a lot of the nature of science activities and engineering activities and art activities is that it doesn't work right the first time. And that's good, because that's an opportunity for you to learn and how to have your next attempt be a little more sophisticated or a little bit more informed. The other thing I want to mention, based on Liz's comments earlier, is that this is a time when we really need to fully embrace science. And there's kind of two ways to think about that. There's the content, what does an epidemiologist have to know? How do you interpret the data that we're seeing on our COVID dashboards every day? But then there's also the skills. How do you look at information and determine if it is biased or unbiased? How do you make a claim that's based on evidence? And how do you make a hypothesis? How do you observe and understand if what you're observing is the complete picture or a partial picture? And going through these kinds of activities will help you build those underlying skills that are not only applicable if you want to have a career as a scientist, but they're also applicable to helping you understand and navigate our very confusing and sometimes intimidating daily news cycle. So I think those are really important things to think about when you're talking about STEAM education, is that it's not just about the biology, the chemistry, the trigonometry. It's about the observing, the understanding, the making claims from evidence that are really, really important. So this book has 46 science activities and STEM, engineering, math, arts, technology, and they're all paired with a story. I'm going to show you a video that I put together here in my own little office that is how this is going to work. So Leslie, if I could share my screen. Okay, here we go. Here's a little video of how to pair science activity with a story.
Hi, today we're going to do an engineering design challenge based on the story of Rapunzel. You're probably familiar with the story of Rapunzel. There's a girl trapped in a tower who has incredibly long hair, and she lets the hair down to the ground so the prince can climb up and visit her. Now, let's say she didn't want to have the prince climbing up her hair. What if she said, "Prince, you need to make a ladder"? And so that's the challenge today. We're going to build a ladder that can reach up to the top of Rapunzel's tower and can hold the weight of the prince. This is an engineering design challenge. The important thing about an engineering design challenge is that you define a problem, you provide materials for kids to be able to solve that problem and test it, and then give them an opportunity to learn from their test, whether it's successful or not, and then incorporate what they've learned into a new test or into a more difficult challenge. So the materials for this engineering design cycle today are things that you probably have around the home. Things like toothpicks, straws, paper clips, spaghetti, jelly beans. You can build a ladder from just about anything. You need something that is somewhat strong and sturdy and some means of connecting them. The different materials you use are different based on the age of the students that you're working with. So it's important to kind of tune the materials that you have to the ages that you're working with. The other thing that I cannot stress enough is that you, as an educator or librarian, need to test this activity out first yourself. You need to get your toothpicks, your glue, your tape, your straws, and try to build a ladder at your kitchen table and test it so that you can understand how it works, so that you are better able to help the students that you're leading in this activity. So one of the things that I found out with my tower is that it knocks over really easy. So I got the biggest book I had on my bookshelf, which is this big old dictionary from the mid-60s, and I'm going to use it to kind of brace my tower up next to, and I'm going to just use a little piece of tape to hold it in place. I also found out that while I was testing my ladders, that they kept on slipping. So I got a little bit of shelf liner, which is kind of a grippy rubber, and it has a little texture to it. I'm going to put it underneath here to keep my ladders from slipping. A little piece of carpet might also work. There's different ways that you can basically make your surface have more friction, and so it's has less slippage on the ladders. The other thing that you need to do is set the parameters for how your ladder is going to be tested. This window is 8 inches off the ground, and we're going to test it by hanging a cup from a paper clip that is filled with pennies off of one of the top rungs. So pennies are a fantastic thing to use as weight whenever you're testing a structure like a bridge or a ladder. So in this case, I've just added a little bit of, I just poked a little hole in here with my paper clip, and I can hold a nice heavy cup full of pennies. This weighs about a pound. So set up your testing station, set the parameters for the students you're working with, provide the materials, and then give them an opportunity to come up with some ideas, build it, test it, and then see what happens. See if it worked, and then either learn from what failed and make a new design, or if it was successful, push them a little bit farther. See if they can make a ladder that is taller, or that can hold more weight, or that is made out of different materials that might not be as successful. So I hope that you try this activity first yourself, but then also with the kids that you work with. Remember, failure is always an option, but we can learn from it and build resiliency, and that's a really important part to this. Thank you very much. If you enjoyed this activity, there's a whole lot of activities in our book, Pairing STEAM with Stories, where all of these science and engineering activities are connected to storybooks. So stories are a great way to introduce a topic, and then doing some hands-on activities so that learning can be interactive and fun and meaningful while still having all the fun and whimsy of a fairy tale or a story. Thank you very much. I hope you enjoy it. I hope your kids are successful. Take care.
All right, so that is a little bit about the approach of pairing storybooks to STEM activities. I think between my introduction and the comments that I made in the video itself, I think I've made my point that you know, if you have really fun activities, kids will enjoy them. They'll learn not only the content pieces, but also so much about resiliency and those soft skills that are as important as the hard facts of science and engineering and math. So.
Brad, I'm sorry, I did a lousy job. I'm sorry, everyone. I did a lousy job of advancing those slides. I just want to call out before we turn this back to Leslie that there are other versions of Rapunzel, a little more feminist versions of Rapunzel. I know there's some librarians on this call. So there are two versions here, How the Library, Not the Prince, Saved Rapunzel. And also the Will Smith version from a couple of years ago. So I just had to throw that in. But it's a great conversation starter, and something we really love about STEM and Stories Together is that it really helps, girl power, I see that from Laura. It really helps develop empathy for characters, and it's a great conversation starter. So thank you so much for your time. We really look forward to seeing what you build and iterate and try again with your kids.
Great, thank you so much, Liz and Brett. So now we have some time for some questions from our audience. I'm going to go ahead and turn our we have here. We have a couple questions that were submitted. If you have a question that you would like to ask, go ahead and put that into the Q&A box. So the first question I think was about, Matthew, about your book. They want to know if they can buy it through Apple Store to read on her iPad. Or, I know I put the link for the Amazon link to the book in the chat box. Is that the only place it's located?
Yep, sorry. It is only available on Kindle, on Amazon through Kindle. And if that's a real problem, email me and I'll send you a PDF copy of the book.
Oh, somebody is saying in the chat that they can use Kindle on their iPad.
I think you can, right.
I have a question about, somebody was asking what the 4 C's are. I think, Liz, maybe you might have mentioned this when you were speaking, the 4 C's.
Yeah, the 21st century skills that were laid out specifically for libraries and museums through the Institute of Museum and Library Service really focus around these 4 core concepts of creativity, communication, collaboration, and critical thinking. So they're interrelated, obviously, and I really think if we all think about our work experiences the last few months, you can see how all 4 have come into play and why they're important. And they're really natural partners for libraries and museums to put into their work, and they're fun to do at home.
Great. I have a question. Some STEM activities require materials not all folks may have at home. Have you heard of ways museums or libraries are delivering STEM materials to families or sites while people are in partial isolation, or providing activities and materials in some kind of kit form?
Yeah, I can address that. There are certainly museums that are doing that. The DuPage Children's Museum is going through a process of helping families get these kinds of materials. I've also seen at my own local library that there are kits of materials that kids can pick up near the front door and take home to do activities. So one of the things that we have found to be successful is working with food pantries and food shelters, because Frequently, parents are already picking up, materials because a lot of the summer meal programs that would normally be supported through summer school are being shifted to other sorts of providers. So that's one place where we've kind of put some of our focus as far as getting toys, really, and learning materials into the hands of kids and families.
And I would just add that we never want materials to be a barrier to access. And that has been really important for all of the work Brett and I have done together through the years. And so what you'll see in this new work or in any of our work is that the materials tend to be easier to find for program providers and for families. So spaghetti and jelly beans, I know not every family has access to spaghetti and jelly beans, but we're not talking high-tech materials here. There are lower entry points to these activities.
So we have a request. Can you share other examples of stories with STEAM activities like the Ladder and Rapunzel story that we can do with our students? So maybe another example from the book.
Sure. I'll go first, Brett, and then you can give one you like. So we use Farmer Will Allen and the Growing Table by Jacqueline Briggs Martin as a jumping off point to talk about how plants can survive just on fresh air and water. So it's a hydroponics lesson. All of these activities in this book have a learning objective to them. I feel pretty strongly that libraries should be moving towards that so they can align their outcomes in their communities. But then it's an easy way to take a plant cutting and learn about hydroponics with a really beautiful book.
Yeah, a couple of my favorites, partially because it's a favorite actual storybook in my home with my 3-year-old, is the story of Trombone Shorty, which is just a fantastic story about, by Troy Andrews, who's a professional trombone player. He has a great band called Trombone Shorty. And it's a story of him growing up in New Orleans. And part of that story is he loved music, but didn't have an opportunity to have an instrument. And so the activity that we've paired with it is called Sound Sandwiches, which is a nice little, kind of like a kazoo that you make out of craft sticks and rubber bands. Very, very easy to make, really, really fun. And then also something that the child can actually make music with, and it's a really nice tie-in. So we try to find things like that where there's a story that has there's a conflict, right? All stories, have a conflict of some sort. There's an issue that needs to be solved, and then we provide an activity that goes along with that. And of course, Pete the cat and is in here, and there's Liz's favorite, the Magic School Bus, and a wonderful activity about the scale of how far the planets are in our solar system, which is really fun as well.
We had a question about posting the titles of the Rapunzel books that you had on your slides, Liz. I will be sending out a link to the recording of this webinar along with a link to those slides, but I can I'll try to flip back to the picture of those books. While we're waiting, if you have any other questions, I think we have time for maybe one more question. If you have another question for our speakers, go ahead and put that into the Q&A box. And while we're waiting to see if there are any final questions, maybe we could just have a closing word from all our speakers, just some advice for the summer or anything like that. Liz, if you want to start.
Oh, I think Matthew's ready.
Oh, Matthew.
You know what I was going to say, first, Brett and Liz, thank you. I love the book. Maybe it's two thoughts. One is, it feels to me like we need to collectively sort of curate everything that is happening out there. The question of how do we get materials to students who need them for at-home learning activities. You know, how do we support and engage parents? I mean, so much of what is happening right now, I think, is local, very organic, very grassroots. A lot of it is an innovative leader or champion, you know, and I am speaking to all of us. You know, we should find a way to curate that and document it. And certainly NSLA can play a role there, but send us thoughts and ideas on how to do that. And the second thing is, you know, I think unfortunately that we need to plan for a really disjointed, we need to begin planning now for a really disjointed 2021 school year. You know, the questions we're having now about how do you get materials to kids, let's think about that collectively for September through May or June next year. You know, we're already having some conversation about, is a second wave already here? But how do we, you know, March sort of hit us out of the blue, and maybe what I'm getting at is how do we, with a little bit of time, you know, begin to plan, you know, for what this looks like going forward, assuming it won't be over quickly. Liz, are you ready now?
Yes. I think building on what Matthew said, for those of us who are program providers and are working in communities, the word is tenacity and resilience. And it has felt at times like it would be easy to say, there's just nothing more we can do. But I know for libraries and museums, we're learning how to be, what the director of Madison, Wisconsin Public Library once said, bigger than our buildings. And I think that's really critical for us in our programs, is to think in a new way and to shift so that we can work at finding new ways to meet kids right where they're at. And I love what Matthew said about getting the collective power of all of our programs and all of our thinking together, because I think we're in this for the long haul. And it's pushing us to think about those 21st century skills, but it's also pushing us to think about the glaring spotlight that's been shown on inequity in this country. We can't give up. Tenacity and persistence has to be our word. Brett?
Yeah, and you know, I would just close out with the sometimes when doing activities like this, some people are a little uncertain themselves, and perhaps they're a little hesitant. And I said, be brave, be bold, do science, let kids watch you, learn right alongside them. And I just think that is such a powerful part of the parent-child relationship, the educator-child relationship, the adult-child relationship, just embracing uncertainty when it comes to these kinds of activities. And you don't have to be the expert, but you have to model great learning. And that's something that we can do for all the kids that we interact with in our lives, whether it's our, you know, program participants or children or neighborhood kids. So just be a good learner. It's the best kind of the teacher we can be. Yeah.
Yeah.
Great, thank you so much. I just want to wrap up with a couple of announcements. July 6th to the 11th will be National Summer Learning Week. We are still having National Summer Learning Week this year, although virtually. And we are excited to hear what you all are doing for summer, how you're celebrating for summer, any events that you're having. So look out for more announcements about new resources, events that we'll be having, special events that we'll be having that week. We're really excited to have you join us to celebrating summer and summer learning. And if you're not already, please be sure to follow us on social media. That's the best way to hear announcements about upcoming webinars, events. Follow us on Twitter, Facebook, we're also on LinkedIn, and join our community, our email list that's to get the latest announcements and resources from us as well. Thank you to our speakers today. Thank you to all of you for joining us, and we look forward to being in touch soon. Have a great day.